Hello and welcome. My name is Ryan Tappy and I work with the ALS Association. Thank you for joining us for this installment of Empowering Your ALS Journey, a webinar series. The goal of this series is to empower you to live fully and with purpose, regardless of where you are on your ALS journey. The title of today's webinar is Speech, Communication, and Voice Preservation with ALS. There are a few things we want you to know before we begin. First off, please know that you are muted and not on camera, so you can relax and enjoy the presentation. There will be time at the end of this webinar to answer questions. You should see a chat box feature on your screen as well as a Q&A feature. You can use either of these options to submit questions you may have. All messages submitted will only be viewable by the hosts and panelists. We will review and answer these questions with our speaker at the end of the webinar. Please keep in mind that our speaker today cannot provide opinions or advice on your personal experiences, and questions should be general in nature about the topic. We do have a very short survey that we are asking that everyone complete after the webinar. The survey will appear in your browser once the webinar ends. This survey helps us to know your thoughts on this presentation and topics you would like us to consider in the future. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website in the educational webinars page within about a week, and you can find that at als.org/webinars. Joining us today to present is speech and language pathologist Kate Nilson. Kate has worked at the ALS Association as a care services manager since 2021. However, she also continues her work as the speech and language pathologist at the University of Minnesota Health Fairview ALS Clinic. At the ALS Clinic, Kate has provided speech, swallowing, and AAC intervention to those living with ALS since 2017. Kate has also taught the AAC course to future speech and language pathologists at the University of Minnesota and is a consultant for Synchron BCI. Prior to coming to the ALS Association, Kate spent 12 years working in home healthcare, specializing in AAC. We thank Kate for taking the time to talk with all of us today, and I'm going to hand it over to her, and I will be back on to help facilitate the question and answer after the presentation. Kate, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you, Ryan, for all of that. And then that kind of makes my first slide kind of moot. Ryan kind of explained. I do really want to be very clear. As Ryan said, I have been the speech language pathologist at the University of Minnesota's ALS clinic for several years. And that is a separate role from my role here at the ALS Association. So I am very fortunate to have two different jobs. Well, actually, as you said, multiple jobs, but today I'm going to be talking about my two different jobs. One, as a practicing speech language pathologist within an ALS clinic, but then also I have another job as a care service manager with the ALS Association. So very fortunate to have kind of two different roles that both involve speech and communication and voice preservation, which are the three topics we're going to cover today. But I always like to start most of my talks by saying, what in the world is a speech language pathologist? It is a mouthful for a profession that specializes in people who have a hard time speaking, which is ironic, I understand. So speech language pathology is, I really think of it as a profession or a degree or a area that focuses on four main areas. Speech is the obvious one, given the title. Language, being thinking of words and putting words together to be able to communicate. But then also the memory and cognition that goes into that speech and language would be another area. And then the one that in the ALS clinic is also involved is the swallowing. We are not addressing that today in this webinar, but in an ALS clinic, a speech language pathologist is typically the professional that would be addressing any changes in your swallowing. And that sounds sometimes silly, but you use those same muscles in your mouth and your throat to speak as you do to swallow. And so a speech language pathologist is the one that might be addressing those issues as well. And so not only is a speech language pathologist a mouthful to say, but we're also referred to as many things. So speech language pathologist gets shortened to just speech pathologist. And I have had someone say, I don't want to meet with her. I don't want to see a pathologist. What's wrong with me? But I promise, just speech language pathologist or speech pathologist. Um, it gets abbreviated SLP because we provide speech therapy and we have the fortune of working with physical therapists and occupational therapists. We are called speech therapists. Um, Again, it all means the same thing. I have also been told, oh, you're a speech therapist. Well, I've seen a speech pathologist. It's the same thing. Also, all of those letters after my name, my goodness, guys, it's not that fancy. I mean, it is, but um, the MS is after my name. I have an MS, Master's of Science. A certificate of clinical competence in speech language pathology is all of that, what those letters stand for. It just means I passed the test and I'm in good standing with my certified body, the American Speech and Hearing Association. If you see someone that has an MA, it just means that the university that they got their degree from gives out a Master's of Arts instead of a Master's of Science. It's just what college they happen to be put in. One is not better than the other. So again, all of that to say, speech therapist, speech pathologist, SLP, lots of different words for the same thing. um, so when you go to a clinic and you see a SLP, speech pathologist, speech therapist, whatever they may call themselves, there are really two main things that a speech assessment is going to include. The first one will be an oral motor exam, sometimes called a cranial exam, sometimes an oral peripheral exam. Really, what they're looking at is the strength, movement, and strength and movement, both the range of movement and the rate of movement of the muscles of the face, mouth, and throat. So we just want to see how are these muscles in the mouth and throat, how are they moving? And it's okay to laugh because people laugh at me all the time when I ask them to do these things. I'm going to ask you to make all of these odd facial expressions so that I can see how your muscles are moving. I'm going to ask you to move your lips, your cheeks, your tongue. I'm going to ask you to do things like pa 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 to see how fast your lips can move, ta 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 ta, which is how fast the front of your tongue can move, and ka 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 ka, which is the back of your tongue. And then I'm going to ask you to put all of those things together by going either pataka, 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 or I prefer to have people say buttercup because I think it's cuter and it's the same movements, buttercup, buttercup, buttercup. How fast can you move that? How articulate is it? And how precise are those movements? Again, all of these odd things we're going to ask you to do, just looking at the strength, the range of movement, and how fast that movement is of those different mouth muscles. So it's going to feel silly. Lots of people laugh. It's fine, but there is a rhyme and a reason to all of the things that we ask you to do. Next, we will assess your speech. And by listening to your speech, I should say, we are really listening for the intelligibility, but also the quality of your speech. And so I personally do this informally by listening to your speech just in conversation. The way we do this in my clinic is I actually go oftentimes into the room with the dietitian. And so as you're talking to the dietitian, I can just listen to the speech and I can just be informally listening to how does your speech sound in conversation. I could then also have you read a passage or a little paragraph. And so I can listen to certain sounds in that paragraph to see how do you articulate those sounds and what do those sounds sound like. There's also something called the sentence intelligibility test, where there's just specific sentences that we'll have you read again, because they have certain sounds that we want to hear. I could also time you while you're reading these things, or I could time you in conversation to get your speaking rate. And now I put on the slide there that the normal speaking rate is 150 words per minute. But I did put a little star there to say 150 words per minute is the norm that I use. I am very aware that depending on what research you read, there are different numbers for this. I myself am much higher than 150. I know that. I talk too fast. Um, but really, what matters is more you compared to you, right? So if you come into clinic and you are at 158 words per minute, and then the next time you come in, you are at 148, it doesn't really matter to me that you are 2 words under the norm. What matters to me is that you're pretty darn close to where you were 3 months ago. So I'm more comparing you to where you were the last time I saw you. That's what matters more to me. Now, if you come in and you're drastically slower than you were before, that suggests, okay, so something's changing with those muscles in your mouth. Are you not able to move the muscles as fast as you used to? Are you not able to take the good breath support that you need to be able to talk? Do you have to stop between words to take a breath? Is that slowing you down? What's happening? And that just is a good, easy way for me to give a nice number of what's going on, and then we can dive deeper into why. We might also test your max phonation time, which again is just a word to see how long can you go ah for as long as you can. So if you're ever in clinic and you walk by a room and hear someone screaming, hopefully they're just doing a max phonation time. So you take a good deep breath and you scream ah for as long as you can, and that lets your speech pathologist hear how long can you hold that out? How good is that breath support that you need to really project your voice for a long period of time? And also, is it a nice steady voice? Is it a steady the whole time? Or does it waver? Because that tells us how those vocal cords are vibrating, which can indicate different things as well. And then as we're listening to all of these different things, we are going to try to determine your percent intelligibility, or how intelligible or how much you are understood. And I struggle with this. I'll be honest, after all my years, I still struggle because I am pretty darn good at this. There's not a lot that I will say I am really good at, but I can understand people pretty well because this is what I do for a living. I talk to people who have changes in their speech. So I've gotten pretty good at it. Also, when I am talking to people in clinic, I am sitting a couple feet away from them in a quiet clinic room and I am listening to them. And so I understand them pretty well. So if I understand 95% of what they're saying during that clinic visit, that might be very different from how much they're understood out at a restaurant, or if they go somewhere where it's really loud, or if they're talking to someone who has a hearing impairment. So, part of for me, I write down how much I understand, what percent of their conversation do I understand? But I also ask them, what percent of the time do you feel like you're understood the first time you say something? Or what percent of the time do you feel like you have to repeat yourself? Because that's really what matters, right? And all of this to say, what are we listening for? We are listening for certain qualities of your speech that help us assess for what is called flaccid spastic dysarthria. And that is just the characteristic speech changes that we oftentimes hear in someone with a diagnosis of ALS. And so if you're listening to this webinar, you probably are somewhat familiar with how ALS is diagnosed. And a part of that is that a neurologist looks for motor neuron involvement in both the upper motor neurons and the lower motor neurons. Now, I want to be very clear that us speech pathologists, no matter what you call us, SLPs, speech therapists, speech pathologists, we do not diagnose ALS, but we can diagnose different kinds of dysarthria. And then we can take that information and we can bring it back to the neurologist. And so this is definitely something that I have done. I will meet with someone and I will say, I hear a flaccid dysarthria, and that means that there is upper motor neuron involvement. Or I hear a spastic dysarthria. And now spastic is a quality of speech that sounds like you're straining. So if you sound like this, where you're really, it sounds like you're really working hard to get the speech out. And it might feel that way too, and it might not, but it sounds that way. And so there's certain qualities of speech that can indicate what motor neurons are affected. And now I bring that information back to the neurologist, and then they use that in their diagnostic process. And so that is again why ALS clinic teams are so important, because then we all work together to bring that information together. And then again, as it says on the screen there, dysarthria is just the medical term for a motor speech disorder. And so again, motor speech being the movement that is needed to articulate for that motor speech. So lots of information on that slide there. Sorry, that's kind of like the heart and soul of the speech assessment there. But so all of that to say, what are things that you might notice in your speech? These are some things you might notice. You certainly won't notice all or necessarily any of them. You may notice speech becomes more effortful. It might become more fatiguing for you to be able to either project your voice or articulate your speech. And so you get more fatigued with talking. Maybe by the end of the day, you're more tired or your voice is more quiet. Um, you might speak slower than you used to, again, either because of the fatigue or just because the muscles aren't moving the way that they used to. Speech may become slurred, again, as the muscles aren't able to articulate and get to that exact placement that they need to. I encourage you the next time, any of you on this call, the next time you are speaking with someone, think about how much your lips and your tongue are moving. And the exact movements that are required for all of the different sounds and how much we take that for granted. And then the slightest bit of weakness in any of those muscles can lead to some slurring. And so that can certainly include changes associated with ALS. The softness of your voice, again, if you're not able to get a good deep breath to project your voice to be loud, that can impact how well you're heard, but also how well you project your voice and the strength of your voice and the quality of your voice. That strained or spastic dysarthria or that strained quality of your voice. I just noticed that I am kind of flip-flopping between speech and voice because those are two different things. Speech being more in your mouth, voice being more in your voice box or your larynx, and they are all muscles that can be affected. And so your speech pathologist will look at all of those different areas, as I said earlier. You can have a hoarse voice. People will come and say, "Oh, it sounds like I'm sick, but I don't feel sick." That hoarse quality of your speech, or a nasal quality. And so this is another muscle that people don't think about. Your uvula, that ball that hangs down in the back of your mouth. People don't think about what that does, but so it hangs in the back of your mouth, and its job when you talk is to come up for some sounds, to close off your nose so that no air can come out your nose for some sounds. And it's supposed to be down for some sounds so that air can come out your nose. But if that muscle, which is a muscle just like any other muscle, if that muscle becomes affected by ALS, it can't move as fast or as far as it used to. Air can leak out your nose when it's not supposed to, or with certain sounds, when the sounds aren't supposed to have a nasal quality, and that can make you sound more or less nasally than you used to. And so that can, again, people will say, "I sound like I have a cold, but I don't." That can be a factor as well. So again, not saying that you're necessarily for sure going to experience all of these changes, but just some common changes in speech that you might experience. But what are we going to do about it? Really, that's where a speech therapist really comes in, is teaching these strategies of what can we do to help. And so we focus first on strategies, and I always break it up into strategies for the person living with ALS and then strategies for the person that they're talking to, because it doesn't all fall on the person that's talking also. So for the person living with ALS, try to speak slowly and pause between words or phrases. And this is for several reasons. One, it gives you a chance to get that good breath so that you can project and be a little louder. But it also gives the person that you're talking to a chance, if they maybe didn't quite understand a word, it just gives a second to fill in that blank and go, oh, I got it now. That's what they said. Versus if you talk really fast and they miss a word, they might not have a chance to fill in those missed words. Exaggerate each sound. So think about if you are somewhere loud and you're trying to be heard, you talk like this and you kind of exaggerate each sound and you speak slowly. So if you can talk like that all the time, maybe not all the time, it'd be pretty tiring, but when you need to, then you can exaggerate those sounds to get those muscles where they need to be able to articulate those sounds. And to be open with the person that you're talking to and say, if you don't understand what I said, please no, it's okay to ask me. It's okay to ask me to repeat because they might not want to. They might not want to be rude and ask you to repeat, but I think it's important that they do because we want them to hear what you have to say. Face the person you're talking to, be in the same room. I can't tell you how often people come into clinic and they say, oh, I understand him fine, except when he's in the other room trying to talk to me and I can't hear him. And so, as I said, like when I'm in clinic, I'm understanding people fine because I'm in the same quiet room as them. And so I'm understanding them just fine. But you have to be in the same room looking at the person that you're talking to. Um, Repeat, reword, or just say the important words. So when I am in clinic, there's always the exam table in the room, and it has a pillow on it. So this is always my example. Is instead of saying, "Excuse me, dear, when you get a minute, would you please get me that pillow?" Well, that's a whole lot of words. Like you just used a whole lot of words to ask for a pillow versus maybe just saying pillow. If you just point to it and say pillow, or even just point to it, you have communicated the fact that you need the pillow and you got the pillow without using all of the energy to say all of those words. I've actually counted, I think it's like 13 words to say all of those words versus just saying the important words, right? Just saying pillow. Um, and just again, thinking about, I think it's here, energy conservation. It does take a lot of energy and a lot of effort to communicate or to talk sometimes. So how can we think about that energy conservation? And that goes, the next one is background noise. If you're fighting against the TV or fighting against all of the background noise of a restaurant or a loud environment or being outside, can you somehow get somewhere where it's quiet so you don't have to be talking over something else? And again, a lot of times it's the TV. Can we mute the TV, say something, and then unmute it so that you don't have to try to be heard so much or heard over something so much? And then planning for fatigue. So again, spending 13 words to ask for the pillow. If you know that the grandkids are coming later and you want to use those 13 words with the grandkids instead of asking for the pillow, save those words, plan ahead. Or, you know, if you would know that you're coming to clinic and good golly, that 13 or the 4 hours that you spend at clinic talking are exhausting. So that night is not the night to call and talk to your buddy because you know that you're going to be tired that day. So plan ahead and manage that. And then my favorite kind of go-to saying is it's about communication, not necessarily speech. And that's going back to my pillow example. It's communicating the fact that you needed the pillow. And that's communicating by pointing or just saying pillow, not necessarily saying all of the words to ask for that pillow. So those are strategies for the person living with ALS. Now some strategies for the listener. They also come back to that energy conservation. What can the listener do to help conserve energy? Give the person talking your full attention, right? Be near them and look at them so that they don't have to repeat, so they don't have to try to be louder. And this is maybe this is my Minnesota nice that I have to say this to everybody, but don't pretend like you understand if you don't. A lot of times people don't want to, oh, I don't want to be rude and ask them to repeat. But really, isn't it more rude to just go off not knowing what they said because you didn't want to ask them to repeat? So just know that it's okay to say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. But then Don't just say, I'm sorry, what? And have them repeat the entire message. Repeat the part that you did understand. So if they asked you for the pillow, but you didn't understand all of it, if they said, excuse me, when you get a second, would you please get me a pillow? If you just say, I'm sorry, what? They're going to repeat the entire thing. So if you say, I'm sorry, I do have a second, but what did you need? And then they just have to say pillow. So all you have to repeat the part that you understood so that all they have to say is the part that you missed. And then that's saving their energy of having to repeat it all. And then if you can ask yes and no questions, then they can just say yes or no, one word, or they can just nod their head yes or no. That's even better. But of course, not all questions can be yes and no, and we understand that too. So again, a lot of it's about energy conservation and how much energy it takes to talk. But then, kind of moving into the second topic that I wanted to talk about, augmentative alternative communication. Again, speech language pathologists love big words, but let's break it down. Augmentative means to support or supplement. So any system or device or trick or anything that supplements or supports your speech and communication would be augmentative communication. Alternative communication is an alternative way to communicate, so other than speech. This is often abbreviated AAC, or broken or shortened to augmentative communication or AugCom. We oftentimes break it into low tech or what we prefer to be called rapid access AAC, or high tech, which is something that is more high tech. It has a battery, it needs to be plugged in, that kind of thing. And we don't have time for my soapbox, but you guys may or may not be aware that sometimes technology doesn't work. That's sarcasm, in case you didn't catch it. Batteries die. You can't take electronics into the shower, that kind of thing. You need to have a low-tech backup to every high-tech system. So everyone should always have a low-tech or rapid access system, even if they have a high-tech system. And then another soapbox that I don't have time to get on is this is mostly for you clinicians that might be listening. Speech generating devices. Really, any device that generates speech. So this can be your phone with an app on it. It can be, again, any device that generates speech is a speech generating device. That is a form of AAC, a form of augmentative alternative communication. So all too often, the term speech generating device and AAC gets used interchangeably, and that's not accurate. AAC is a umbrella term that refers to any system, anything at all that supports or is used as an alternative form of communication. So that can be anything from a laser pointer to an app to a speech generating device. Those all fall underneath this umbrella. But a speech generating device and an AAC device are not exactly the same thing. So those two terms are not the same. And so that's just kind of my little soapbox. So I created this little picture to hopefully explain that. And I can certainly answer more questions about that. But to give you some examples of AAC, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. This is literally what would fit on the slides in what I thought was the amount of time that we had. Here are some rapid access or low tech AAC options. So a voice amplifier, really it's just a microphone. So if projecting your voice or being loud is something that you struggle with, we can get a voice amplifier, again, just a microphone that you can wear that can project your voice so that you don't have to. And so this can be something that sometimes I recommend these just for energy conservation, just because people are spending so much energy trying to be heard. And sometimes these are Bluetooth so that the speaker can be brought in the other room, so that if a caregiver is oftentimes not in the same room and you don't have the energy or the breath support to yell to be heard in the other room, well, then you got the microphone and you can just say, hey, will you come here when you get a second? And then it goes through the speaker into the other room. And so the voice amplifier, can be really helpful as a supplement. So again, this is an augmentative communication tool. The Boogie Board. I love the Boogie Board. Boogie Board is the brand name. It's really an LCD tablet is what they're called. It's like an Etch-a-Sketch or a Magnadoodle. You write on it and then you hit the button and it deletes or goes away, right? So you use it like pen and paper, but without wasting so much paper. So this can be either augmentative or alternative. So you can have it with you. It's really lightweight, which I really appreciate. If you're somewhere loud or at the end of the day, your speech can't be understood, you can write it out, right? Or if you're talking and there's just one word that someone's not understanding, you can write that one word. Or I have plenty of people who this is their primary form of communication is they write everything on their boogie board, and that is fine. I always say I don't care how you communicate as long as you have a way to do it. And so if this works, that's fine. And so these are really handy again because they're lightweight, easy to use. Everyone, as long as you have that hand dexterity to write, this is a great option. Now, of course, if holding the stylus to do this is difficult, there are other options, and we will actually dive more into that in a minute, the access options. But I did want to dive into communication boards, is what they're called. Really, they're pieces of paper with messages and letters on them. But so if you look down, the letter boards with laser pointer, the idea there, as I kind of tried to maneuver the pictures, is you could have a laser pointer and then a piece of paper or a board with the letters on it, and you could just point with either the laser pointer or with your fingers, point to the letters to spell out a message. Or what's pictured there is on the back of that communication board are whole messages. And you could either use the ones that we have created or you can make up your own. So you just point to, I need to go to the bathroom, and then your message is communicated. So you don't have to write out the whole thing or spell it out or anything. You have that whole message just by pointing to it, either with your finger or with a laser pointer or a stylus or whatever works for you. Also, there is up in the upper right, partner assisted scanning. So if pointing to things is difficult, the idea of partner assisted scanning is that your communication partner scans through options. Like they would say, if is the letter that you want in the first row? Is it in the second row? Is it in the third row? And when it gets to what you want, you indicate some way. You guys would determine what way that is, whether that is an eye blink, a head nod, a foot tap, whatever it is. You indicate in some way, yes, the letter that I want is in that row. So let's say it's in the row that starts with O. Then I would say, okay, it's in the O row. Is it O? Is it P? Is it Q? Is it R? And then I nod my head. Okay, R. R is the first letter. So here I've indicated the letter without having to move any other body part. And so I don't know that I have the time to go into all of the details of all of this, but just to kind of show that there are lots of different options that don't require technology that can be used no matter what movement you have. And then lastly, that E-Tran or eye tracking board. We do have different versions of this, but I think that picture kind of helps show what they're doing there is the gentleman is looking at different letters and the woman that's holding the board is just following his eye movement. So is just following where he's looking, and that's how they're selecting the letters on that board. And again, we have things that aren't quite so big like that one, but I think that picture just kind of helps to show it. So again, if there's specific questions, I can go into more, but just to show you that there's lots of options that don't require any technology that are either a great backup or can be a sole method of communication. Moving into some higher tech speech generating devices. So all of these are actually devices that do generate speech, meaning that they will speak whatever you type or whatever message you select. So on the top, we have to commonly used apps, there are tons out there. Again, talk to your speech pathologist and they can help you figure out which ones are going to meet your needs because there's a lot out there. But I picked these two because these pictures really show what most of the apps or the apps that I typically recommend include. So all of them should include a keyboard where you could type out a message. So you can type out a message and it will speak whatever you've typed, or an option to save commonly used messages. So the one on the right, that speech assistant, it has different categories. In the gray are different categories, and then the white squares are the stored messages. So you can organize them in categories. Like you could have a category of when I come to clinic, these are the questions they're going to ask me. Or when I come to clinic, these are the questions I want to ask the team. You have them all so that you don't have to type out each message individually. And so those are apps that can go on a phone or a tablet, and that can be accessed either by your fingers or a stylus, or we have some other options that we'll get to in the next slide. Across the bottom are some insurance funded dedicated speech generating devices. And the reason I say it that way is these are devices that are considered durable medical equipment, meaning that they could be paid for through insurance. And the reason I kind of make that distinction is, to my knowledge, most insurances will not pay to put an app on your phone. But they will pay for a communication device such as the ones across the bottom of the screen. However, most insurances, again, to my knowledge, I'm trying to make sure I cover my rear end here, will only pay for one device every 5 years. And so I always recommend to anyone I see in clinic that we kind of save that time, that device that we get through insurance, that we save that for a time when we need a big speech generating device like one of these down at the bottom. And the reason I say that is because these devices have what's called eye gaze interaction. And so across the bottom of each of these is a bar that has cameras in it that will follow your eye movement so that you can control the screens of these devices with your eye movement. And these devices are very expensive if you were to try to buy them on your own. And so we want to wait and buy those through or get those through insurance if it were to ever get to where you needed something like that. And again, not saying that you ever would, but if you were, we would want to have the opportunity to get that through insurance versus if we were to get a different device early on, and then insurance would say, well, you got your device, you have to wait 5 years to get another one. And there are some workarounds, but certainly talk to your speech therapist and know that going in that there are some insurance caveats to that. And then I promised that I would talk about access. So I love to kind of make I don't even know if it's a joke, but to say, people come to me and say, I think I'm getting to where I need a communication device. And I say, great, I'm a speech therapist. I can help you with that. But my first question is, how are your hands? Which seems like an odd question, but it is important to just kind of think, how are you going to use any sort of communication device that we might get for you? And so if you are still able to use a phone or a tablet or a touch screen, then that is a great option. We can also, there's adaptive stylus options like the ones there where you can then continue to use a touchscreen device. Underneath that is an example of a head mouse, which means that we can get you something like that where that example is a glass house where you wear this device and then your head movement controls the cursor on the screen so that you can continue to use your tablet or your phone, and your head movement controls the cursor on the screen rather than your hand movement. And so that's just a way to continue to use that device if your hand function becomes too fatiguing. On the right-hand side is what's called switch scanning. So that is where, like in that picture on the top, if you see the one square is highlighted in red. And the idea there is that things are being highlighted on the screen. And when the item that he wants is highlighted in red, he'll hit that button. And so he has to wait until what he wants is highlighted, and then all he has to do is hit that button. Underneath that, similarly, there's two buttons. There's a white one and an orange one. In this setup, I don't know, 'cause I don't know exactly how it's set up, but possibly the white button would move that yellow square. So right now that yellow square is highlighting that first row. I suspect if you hit the white button, it might move that down to the second row of icons on that iPad. And then if you hit the orange, it would select it to say, yep, the thing I want is in this row. Then you could do the white to move which item is highlighted, and then the orange to select it. And so again, you wouldn't have to move, you wouldn't have to have the fine motor movement to be able to select on the screen. You could use a palm or a fist or even a foot or elbows or any other body movement that might be able to access those buttons. So again, all of this just to say that there are a lot of other ways to access communication devices other than just your hands. And so again, going back to the benefit of attending a multidisciplinary clinic is because I work so closely with the OTs, both in my clinic and my colleagues at the ALS Association, because I know the communication devices, but they know all of this stuff to help us figure out what device is going to help and what access method, which just means how are you going to interact with that device in the most effective and least tiring way. And so there's lots of options out there. And then lastly, I'm going to switch gears and talk about the last subject, which is voice preservation. And this is a big topic, and I know that there is a lot of information on the screen, and I very deliberately did that. And so I'm sorry that there's so many words on here, but I wanted it all on one slide so that you could easily compare the three different areas of voice preservation. So what is voice preservation? In short, it is a way to make it so that if you're using any of those AAC or speech generating devices there, I just did it myself, you guys. I used AAC, and what I meant was speech generating devices. If you are using any of those speech generating devices to generate speech, the voice that comes out of the box is going to be a generic computer voice. It's going to be a generic voice that just sounds like a computer voice. The idea of voice preservation is that we could make it so that the voice that comes out of the device, so that comes out of your phone or a tablet or an iPad or a dedicated speech generating device through your insurance, the voice that comes out could sound like yours. And there are three different ways to do that. And if you drown out everything else I say, just remember to do all three. That's the big takeaway, is to do all three of these. But to dive in, the three different kinds of voice preservation are voice banking, message banking, and voice cloning. Voice banking is the process of making a computer voice that mimics your own. So the benefit of doing this is that anything that you want to say, anything that you want to type, any pre-saved message that you select from a list, anything that you want to say can be spoken in this synthetic or computerized voice that sounds like you. But the limitation is that it's computerized, right? I mean, it's a computer voice. So it sounds like a computer voice. It's going to sound kind of monotone. It's not going to sound exactly like you. How do you do it? You have to record yourself saying specific predetermined sentences. So there are different companies out there. How many sentences you have to record depend on which company you use. But there are a set number and very specific sentences. that you need to record. These sentences don't make any sense. The company that I use most often is called Acapella. One of the sentences is, "He's big the way water buffalo are big." That is not a sentence I've ever said in my life. I don't think it's a sentence I would ever say outside of this context, but it obviously gives the combinations of sounds that are needed to make this synthetic or computerized voice. Okay? And I will play the example in a second. um, Now, message banking is just recording yourself saying a message. So obviously the benefit of that is that it's a recording of you. It sounds exactly like you, right? I mean, it's 100% you. It's a recording of you. It's got all of your inflection and your tone, and it sounds exactly like you. But you could never possibly record everything that you're ever going to want to say. Um, so you're limited to just what you think to record in the moment, or not in the moment, but like what you think to record at the time that you're recording. And so how do you create that? You just record yourself saying the messages. And there's lots of different ways to do these recordings, but you just need to record yourself saying the messages that you can think of. Um, Lastly, the voice clone is kind of the newest of all of these. And what that is using AI to create a very realistic AI generated version of your voice. So lots of benefits to this. Anything can be spoken in a voice that is very realistic and similar to your own. I was in clinic one day and we played, is it really Kate or is it her AI voice? And it was about 50-50 on who was right. So they're very, very realistic, which is great. But there are some limitations. So it does require an internet connection. So if you're somewhere and like I had someone come into clinic and they tried to use their voice and they weren't connected to the guest Wi-Fi and were in a cement, box in clinic and they didn't have good reception and so it wasn't working. There is a slight delay after typing or after selecting something because you type out something, it goes over the internet, gets transcribed into your voice, and then comes back. So there is this delay. It's also because it's new technology, it's not compatible with everything. The voices that the company that we use to make this voice clone isn't compatible. You will notice it twice on the slide. I put September 2025 because I'm very aware that this is always changing. And this is the most recent information that I have. So hopefully by if you're watching this at a later date, maybe this has changed. But this is the most up-to-date information that I have. And the most exciting part of voice cloning, in my opinion, is how you create it. You create it by submitting recordings of yourself. So this could be the recordings that you create when you do your voice banking. So it could be the recordings of you saying he's big the way water buffalo are big, right? You have to record yourself to submit the recordings for voice banking. So you have those recordings. That's great. You record yourself for message banking. You have those recordings. Great. If your ALS presents with changes in your speech, and so by the time you get your ALS diagnosis and people start talking to you about voice preservation, your speech has already changed. If you have any recordings of you pre-diagnosis or pre-ALS. Like if you have old voicemails or if you ever gave a speech at a wedding or were on a podcast. We've had a lot of people be on podcasts lately. Or anything like that. You can take those recordings and submit those. They obviously the more recordings they have, the better. Um, I believe they can do it with as little as 30 seconds. Obviously, the more the better. I created mine with 10 minutes of a lecture that I gave once, and it's pretty darn good, as you will see. So let's now, Ryan, we tested this before and it worked. So you just let me know if it doesn't work. This is my voice banked synthetic voice. I used Acapella and the Apple Personal Voice that is built in to the newer iPads.
This is an example of voice banking. This is a synthetic version of my voice.
Okay. See, now actually, I think when you first listen to it, you're like, oh, that sounds pretty good. But wait. This is an example of message banking. This is a recording of my true voice. All right, so you can tell that I try to be a little exuberant there. Like I was like really trying to have some flair to show that like that's just like I just recorded myself right? Like that is 100% me. Now this is the AI generated voice. Again, I took a lecture that I gave years ago and submitted the audio file, and this is my AI voice. Voice clone. This is my AI generated voice. So you can see, like it even said my voice clone, and like it like gave me gave me a little bit of sass, which I appreciate, and then it did give me it gave me more inflection, right? Not necessarily the inflection that I would typically give, but it gave me some that made me sound more like a person. So now I want to have you listen to the voice bank one again.
This is an example of voice banking. This is a synthetic version of my voice.
So now after hearing the AI one, that sounds a lot more monotone, in my opinion, right? So listen to this one again. This is an example of a voice clone. This is my AI generated voice. Right? So there's quite a difference there. But again, the reason I say to do all three is because there are speech generating devices that can interchange between these. So if you are in a situation where you don't have internet, then you could use your voice banked voice, right? And also it knows if you go to say a message that you have recorded under message banking, it plays the recording. If you go to say something you don't have recorded, it uses either your voice banked or your voice clone, depending on which one you have it set. So it's not like you have to choose which one you're going to use. It interchanges between them all. And so I think it's really important to do all three if you can. But I'm really excited about the voice clone option. Um, and I believe the first question is probably going to be, how do we do that? And so voice cloning is done through our partners at Bridging Voice. And so you can reach out to them, or your care service manager can help you get connected with them. And voice and message banking, same thing. You can talk to your care service manager, depending on where you are. Either you can get local support, your care or your speech language pathologist, or Team Gleason is another partner that will help us. And then that leads us to the questions part, which I hope there's some, because we got a little bit of time and I would love to answer.
Hey, Kate, thank you so much for that. Yeah, that was a great presentation. And I did see one question. I'm not sure if you answered it right at the end there. You may have, but I'm just going to ask it again. And if you feel that was the answer, you can just reiterate. And they asked, what was used to create the voice clone?
Yeah, so it was when I had given a lecture. So it was I had I had recorded myself giving a lecture, kind of like this. Like if I had took this recording and submitted it. I will say I know that the company that makes the voice clones, they do prefer that the files be MP3 files. But I've had people, there's ways that you can modify files if you have a techie person in your family. I've even had, because the issue is it needs to be just you talking. Like, so you can't take old family videos because you don't want other people talking in the background. But I've had people take old family videos and slice out like just when you're talking. And if you can if you're techie enough and slice out just the times when the person living with ALS is talking, and then can take those and turn them into an MP3 audio file and submit that, they can do it. They can also help you through all of this too, because they're very good.
Perfect. And can you just repeat that company that you used, that you mentioned about that can assist with voice cloning?
Yeah, it's called Bridging Voice.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, here's the some resources, and I should have included them in there. That would have been a good one. Bridging Voice can help with the voice clone, and Team Gleason can help with voice banking and message banking. But again, talk to your speech therapist, because they might be able to help you too. And then you get in-person help, and they might know about local supports that can help too. Because you might have like I know we have like a state grant that can help. And so you might have local supports too, which is why you'd want to check with your local people.
Okay. One individual asked about the timing of doing voice preservation, especially with bulbar onset. If their speech doesn't quite sound what they consider normal at this point, is it still is it advantageous to do it sooner? And is that still okay to do even if maybe your voice isn't
Yes.
what it once was?
Yes. I always say it's never too early. It's never too early to do it. And actually, I would kind of argue, um, I would say maybe I shouldn't say never too late, but um, I would encourage you to still do it. Um, and then what I say is it doesn't mean you have to use it, right? You can do the recordings, see what it sounds like. And if you don't like it, you don't have to use it, right? Like no one's forcing you to use the recordings, but it doesn't hurt to have them. In my many years of being in this line of work, I've never had someone regret doing it. I've had lots of people say, "Gosh, you bugged me about that, and I never did it, and I really wish I would have." And also, I've had lots of families say, "I really wish they would have done it because I really miss hearing their voice." Even if it doesn't sound exactly like it used to, I would say it's more you than Siri, right? Yeah, even if it doesn't sound exactly the way you used to sound, it sounds more like you than the generic computer voice. So,
Okay.
and it's
Um,
free. So,
yeah.
why not?
Speaking generally across everything you kind of talked about today, do you find any issues with insurance coverage for some of this stuff, or do you find insurance helps with some of this stuff? I know
That is
that's
a
a
great
broad
question.
question.
No, that's a great question. To my knowledge, insurance never covers voice preservation. Um, but um, voice banking and message banking is covered by Team Gleason. Voice banking, Team Gleason will pay for the creation of the voice. Again, like I said, it's free to create the voice. And as I said, like you can do the recordings and listen to it. The way it works, just to kind of get in the weeds, but I do this because I think it helps people feel better. um, you do the recordings and then you hear a sample of the voice. And if you hear the sample and you don't like it, then you don't have to use it. If you decide that you want to use it, that's when Team Gleason pays for it. There's absolutely no harm in doing the recordings and hearing the sample of it. Um, and then again, Team Gleason has fabulously agreed to cover the cost, and they have a relationship with all the different companies that they have worked that out. So that's voice banking. Message banking is free. You just have to record yourself, right? So you record yourself however you want. The support in doing that, Team Gleason can support you or your local speech therapist. And I know as a practicing speech therapist myself, as long as I kind of fudge it that I am assessing your speech as you record those messages, I can say it's speech therapy. Like I can say like, "Oh, you should really try that one again using this strategy." Well, then I'm providing therapy, and I can work around it that way. Um, or again, the Team Gleason can provide support or talk to your local speech therapist who might have other resources for you. And then the voice clone is through Bridging Voice, which is another partner of the ALS Association. Um, and they work with a fabulous company. I'm dropping lots of names here. I'm sorry. A company called 11 Labs, which is the company that has fabulously agreed to create the voice clones free of charge. So
Wonderful.
again, it can all be done for free, so no insurance is needed for that. Now, the AAC part, as I kind of mentioned, the devices, most insurances will cover one every 5 years, and they will cover speech therapy sessions or training sessions to get them set up and provide training and all of that. Um, so that should be covered. And again, the clinic SLP should have all of those resources for you. So, um,
Perfect.
and if they don't, that is part of my role here at the ALS Association. So,
And
is to reach out to have your SLP reach out to me because I'm at
and that answers a lot of the questions that I had gotten about who to reach out to, who to talk to, and you answered that kind of in a few of these answers that you've given, which is great. Just one last question because I know we're at time. Just and this one's more general. Are there any changes or improvements that you hope to see in this field of communication with ALS in the future? Any maybe even like a wish list in a sense.
Oh, goodness. I mean, I think mo like most people, I'm excited about AI and also kind of scared. All the things. But I mean, just seeing what it's done with voice cloning, I think that's exciting. You mentioned in my intro that I also consult with a BCI or brain computer interface company. And so I'm really excited about that. Just how using that to interact with devices, with computers, and how that will hopefully speed up communication. Because I should know this off the top of my head, but the rate of communication, I said the average speaking rate is 150 words per minute. The average communication rate of someone using a communication device is not that.
Okay.
I really wish I could have pulled the number out, but it's really significantly slower. And anyone on the call who has interacted with someone using a communication device will know that, and how frustrating that is. And so I really hope that advances in brain-computer interface can speed up the rate of communication of someone using any AAC or speech generating device.
Wonderful.
So,
Wonderful. Well, we are unfortunately out of time, but we did get through most of the questions that we
okay.
got. So once again, I just want to thank our wonderful speaker, Kate Nilson, for the amazing presentation. A couple of quick reminders. We will have a recording of this presentation available on our website. It'll be available on our educational webinars page, which you can find at als.org/webinars. You can also use that web page to view all of the past recordings of webinars we've done in the past, and also to sign up for the future webinars that we are hosting in the coming months. Lastly, a final reminder that you will receive a short survey when we end this webinar. Thank you to everyone who was in attendance today, and thank you again to our speaker, Kate. We hope everyone has a great rest of their day.